Hello, I'm Laura.
I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
We are reading The Game of Kings by Dorothy Dunnett. We're on part 4, chapter 2. We're going to start with our overall reactions to this heartbreaking chapter. Philippe, do you want to go first?
So this is definitely the most action-packed chapter that we've seen so far. There have been bits of action in the story, but like from beginning to end, there's this intense buildup of things that happen. And we get sort of, the first section is called the fast moves, where like things for this chapter set in place. The second section is the tragic moves, which I knew immediately something bad was going to happen, and I sort of saw that one coming. And then the final section is sort of the meeting between brothers that we've been waiting for this whole time. And it's just one long sprawl. I found it very easy to read from start to finish. It was very clear and concise in what it was trying to say and do. And I just loved it. This is probably my favorite chapter in the book, even with the heartbreaking things that happen in it.
Yeah, it was a good chapter. I was super sad. I do not particularly like fight scenes in books. I tend to skim battles. Like if I'm reading hard sci-fi, which tends to have a lot of space battles in it, I just skip the battles. I don't care about strategy or whatever. But I was fascinated by this sword fight between Lymond and Richard. Like it was character driven in a way that I think a lot of fight scenes are not character driven, or at least don't attempt to be character driven. I mean, of course, I was really sad that Christian died. Although, like Philippe, I was actually not surprised when the chapter was titled The Tragic Moves, I think, and I just went, oh. So as soon as Christian came on the scene, I was like, oh, this is not going to end well.
Yeah, I was like, it's either time for Christian or Gideon, one of the two people in this chapter that I seem to care about. And
yeah. They were definitely going to, somebody that that was like a high stakes person was going to die. And we've kind of had a lower stakes person die with Turkey Matt, and now we have someone high stakes person die with Christian. So.
And there's definitely parallels between the way they both died. Both had to do with fleeing, both had to do with an arrow being shot. So
fleeing by someone who shouldn't have been fleeing.
Yes.
Christian died because Simon.
Right. I mean, it wasn't even her that was fleeing, which is the really tragic part of it. So.
Yeah. But honestly, I think the most heartbreaking thing about the entire thing, not that her death was definitely heartbreaking, and of course that was the most heartbreaking, but I think the thing that to me that was the most heartbreaking in the whole thing was that the pages were blank. And it just, like, that was a brilliant thing that Dunnett did, because it was just like, yeah, that was wrenching.
I also felt really bad for Tom.
I know.
Like, he really came a long way in my estimation in this chapter, especially towards the end.
He's such a good guy. When we get to the scenes with him in Lymond and the arrow and everything, I was fully expecting Tom to sacrifice himself and die at the end of this chapter. I thought this chapter was going to end with Tom dead, and having taken that shot for Lymond. So I was actually surprised when that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I like Tom.
I'm trying to remember how I reacted when I first read it. I definitely remember that I was really surprised that Christian died. I didn't think, from the way the book was written from like the beginning, structurally, I didn't think that she was going to die, because she was engaged to Tom. I thought maybe it would be a tragic lost love or something, but I didn't think that Dunnett was actually going to kill her off, especially because it seemed like there was more that could have happened, in her story and her relationships, which I think Dunnett set up on purpose to make it hurt extra, the unresolved nature of her relationship with Lymond and her relationship with Tom.
I expected someone to die of that level that we cared about, like Sibylla or, you know, like someone. But I agree, I was not exactly expecting Christian to die. I thought that there would be more, especially since we've got a whole series of multiple books, and I thought she was going to be going forward. So
I remember in an earlier discussion we had, I said that I didn't expect that Christian and Tom would actually ever get married, but I did not expect this to be the reason why, unfortunately. I thought since there were so many books that like the Christian and Lymond relationship would sort of grow over time, but
I have a suspicion about Tom and about Lymond in relationships that we will get to when we get to that scene. But
sure.
I will say also in a way that I will try to say without spoilers is just that I think this is a really important chapter in the context of the entire series, because it's like a lot of what happens in this chapter is a microcosm of things that happen later in like multi-book arcs. And a lot of the themes that come in here are themes that will grow and play out more, but they kind of come into their come into like obvious view here for the first time. And again, trying not to be spoilery, so I'll just say like overall reaction to the chapter. I love, like Philippe was saying, the buildup of tension and how readable it is and how it builds up like the pace and your excitement as all these characters, like you kind of start with these characters in different places and they all converge and you cut back and forth between them. And it reminds me a little bit of the end of Return of the Jedi.
I mean, even in the way Dunnett writes, she's used to writing these long sections. And like, even in chapters that are broken up, sometimes the sections get very long. And here we've got very short, sometimes only 2 or 3 paragraphs at a time, little bullets that we go from point to point to point. So,
yeah.
And then I guess the other overall things, I think there's a couple of themes that really stand out to me, like kind of that are sprinkled throughout, is this idea, first of all, this idea of like Lymond's facade is starting to crack. It was starting in the previous chapter, but now it's happening more and more, and we're starting to see Francis Crawford inside of Lymond. And we're also starting to see, I don't know, I'm going to talk about this more when I'm going to lead on the next chapter, this idea of, in a way, this is like fanfic of its influences. It goes to like what you really, really want and just like finds a way to give it to you in a way that like Robin Hood or the Scarlet Pimpernel never goes that deep. This book finds a way to just like give you everything you ever wanted out of the story. Again, I'm going to talk more about that in the next chapter, but I think you start to see it in this one too, with the intensity of the confrontation between the brothers. Like you guys were talking earlier, what do we want to see out of this book? And it's like, we want the confrontation. I think also the other themes that stand out to me in this is there's a lot of imagery of sacrifice and martyrdom as Lymond and Christian are trying to find ways to sacrifice themselves for each other. There's a couple of crucifix images. There's the image of Hexham Abbey. There's the image of the dovecot, which is like doves representing peace.
But it's burned out.
I know.
Yeah, it's like a blackened shell of itself.
And then also there's these like this idea of Lymond trying to find the meaning in his life, and he thinks he's found it in being able to sacrifice himself first for Christian and then for the Queen. And I guess one last thing I'll say that I love is the Lymond has this irony that's almost postmodern, like he's playing a part, and when Richard comes in, it's like Richard is having this very serious confrontation, and Lymond has been playing a character the whole time, and he kind of plays his part, but he's a man out of place, out of time, not quite like everything that everyone else sees him as is not what he is, and he has to like play this role, but that's not what's really going on. And I just find it like super fascinating. And anyway, we'll talk about it more when we get there.
We'll talk about it more. There will be more.
Okay,
so Chapter 2, we start the ultimate check. We start out with the fast moves. So we start out with Lymond at Gideon Somerville's estate, the Flaw Valleys. Flaw Valleys, yeah. Yep. Interesting name, by the way. But he is being sort of watched over by Kate, which is delightful. And we get this series of pages with Lymond and Kate sort of having this repartee going back and forth, and she's trying to get him to reveal parts of himself, and he does not want to reveal parts of himself. And I love this little bit at the top of 379 where she passes him some salt, and the text says he accepted the condiment but not the challenge. And I love that it's like, I'll take your salt, but I'm not taking what you throw down.
And then later he sends it halfway through the table, and it refers to the table as something like the board that they're playing on.
Like a shuffleboard or something.
Yeah.
He likes it. Yeah.
Metaphor for this game they're playing.
He accepts the condiment, but not the challenge. Yeah, and basically there's a point where he says that he's not going to do this back and forth with her because he's better at it than she is. So yeah.
But it's actually
he is.
When he says, I'm a constant practitioner of the art and you are not, I mean, I don't think it means that he's proud of it by any means.
No.
And then he starts talking about habits, and it's like he's got this habit of being awful to people.
Yeah, and he refers to her as a snake, but him as a shark. So it's like, would you rather have a snake bite you or a shark bite you? And I'm like, yeah, I think I'll take my chances on the snake, because, like, so I thought that was kind of an interesting, an interesting piece. I underlined something on 380, but I don't know if you guys wanted to say something for the pieces before that.
I also underlined something on 380, but I don't know if it's before or after the thing that you underlined.
So I just wanted to point out the bit where he basically reads her really clearly, where he says, what you want is very clear. You want my confidence. If you can't have that, you want to goad me into making admissions about myself. If you can't have that, use moral pressure. I'm quite conscious of my obligations and misdemeanors towards the members of your family. I disagree about the mode of compensation. That's all. And I just like that he's like, yeah, you're right. I've done all these things. I'm still not going to give you what you want.
And it's interesting that it seems the only one that doesn't really truly forgive him for what he did was Philippa. Like, Gideon and Kate seem to just brush it aside and be like, yeah, you treated her pretty awfully when you were here, but like, we understand sort of who you are and what you're trying to do. Even to the point where Gideon keeps saying, like, what a waste. They've wasted this man up in Edinburgh. Like, I don't know why they're not using him. But then Philippa's sort of the only one that won't forgive him for the way he treated them on his first visit to Flaw Valleys. I know we're getting ahead of things, but...
No. This is my prediction. Okay, so I do not know the time span of the rest of this series. We could have a book a year, in which case the series is going to be done in 5 years. But if there is more of a time skip than that, if this series goes like 10 years or 15 years in the future, I think Philippa is going to be I think she's going to grow up and be part of this story as a interest of Lymond's. I think she's too feisty, and like, she's being written as a little kid and a little girl, so obviously that's not true right now. But I think if we jump forward 5 years or 8 years into the future, like, she's going to be a young woman, and I think, I don't know.
I think
she's written a little bit too detailed for a kid, like a side kid in a book. I think she's going to come up again later.
Do we know their age difference? Like, I think Lymond is younger than Kate and Gideon, but like,
yeah,
I don't think
for sure.
Not close to Philippa either.
Isn't she like 10 or so in this story? Huh?
Philippa is 10.
She's 10. So we only have to go 6 years in the future for her to be valid as a romantic choice.
True, things were,
I mean,
a little bit skewed differently back then.
Agnes is 14. So.
True. I could see that happening.
Yeah.
I guess it all
I'm
depends.
not saying it's going to happen, but I just think she's too feisty and too interesting.
I was totally shipping Lymond and Christian, though.
I know, me too.
Yeah, I know.
But some things cannot be, alas.
Well, me too. And actually, I thought of this after Christian died. I was like, okay, so... I was like, all right, Christian's dead, so she's not an option. I was like, I wonder. I don't know.
I will also highlight, before we get to the scene with Philippa, which is a wonderful one, but while he's still talking to Kate and they're kind of having their battle, he gives a little speech at the start of 381 that's very revelatory. Yeah, I bet you underlined it. I prize freedom of the mind above freedom of the body. I claim the right to make my own mistakes and keep quiet about them. You have all the license in the world to protect your husband. My life is at your disposal, but not my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that's actually true in a broader sense. Like, he's willing to die on multiple occasions. Like, he will give up his bodily safety, but not his integrity or mental safety, or even he'll violate his integrity, but for a greater purpose, and not give that up to people. Yeah. So, yeah.
Also in 380, there's just a bit right before the part you quoted, where she's pushing and pushing, and he finally reacts. It says, "The long, slender fingers tightened about the salt cellar. Leave it, can't you?" said Lymond softly. I'm highlighting this because it's his fingers tightening on the salt cellar that tells you what's really going on, which is how much of a reaction he's having and is hiding. And you'll notice kind of throughout the books, if you watch what his hands are doing, even when his voice isn't revealing anything, even when his face isn't revealing anything, if he's doing something with his hands, something's going on. And if you go back and read that scene with Margaret Lennox, their confrontation in front of the fire, and watch his hands, you'll see things, and other places also.
Sorry, there was a motorcycle brigade walking through. I'll try and mute myself if that happens again.
I actually couldn't hear it, so
no. Oh, okay. It was very loud to me. So.
Yeah, and then at the end of that scene with Kate, where he says, like, "Thank you." Lymond says, "I wouldn't for the world deprive you of the last bite. Thank you," said Kate, "if we're referring to snakes, not if you were talking about fish." Then he calls her Pythonissa, which is basically just female snake. So, like, okay, it's kind of complimentary, but kind of not, which I sort of love.
It's like an almost playful, flirtatious banter, but we know they're not flirting.
No.
So they just.
But I think they're having fun with their conversation. Like, they're adversaries, but I think they're enjoying their adversariness in this.
I think it's rare that Lymond gets to speak to somebody that's almost at his level of talking like this. Because, like, she understands what he's throwing out, and she's throwing it right back at him. Yeah. So, like, he's reveling in that.
Well, and he's been, I mean, we get to this a little further on, but it's been 5 years since he's been able to talk to anybody, like, openly. So,
yeah.
He's like, in a way, he's trying to stop himself from talking more.
Yeah. And Kate also doesn't have a hidden agenda, as far as I can tell, at all. Like, she's mad at Lymond because he invaded her house and, like, kind of interrogated her daughter, but she's very open and clear about that, and she doesn't seem to have she's not trying to manipulate him into anything or make him do anything, or, I mean, and that just must be refreshing for him.
The Somervilles are a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. So then we get this lovely scene with Philippa.
Oh, before we go there, 4 days had taught her that she could nearly shake his self-control, and that he was himself shaken and dismayed by his weakening grip of himself. And I just like the way she sets this up, that he's slowly losing this facade that we saw from the beginning, bit by bit.
Yeah. And apparently he's been trying to win over Philippa this whole time, and Philippa is not having it.
But I love the way he tries, and he's so good with kids, and we saw how good he was with Mary Queen of Scots when she was little. Right. And he's the same thing with Philippa. Like, he knows she likes music, so he tries to tempt her with the music. He knows an easy song. He tries to engage her with it. Like, this is the way you engage with a kid. But Philippa is just like,
Nope. Yeah. And I just love, like, she sticks to her guns, you know, like, even as a little kid, like, she's not, oh, wait, Yeah, it's not that she's necessarily sees through him in what he's doing, but she's just not having it.
This is Heart by Lynn.
Angry she looks.
Don't touch it, I hate you. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure there's a lot. It's not a really subtle scene, but it's just a fun scene, I think.
It is, and I think, I mean, I like that afterward he's sitting there quietly, and that's when Kate comes in, and that's when she has her breakthrough with him, and I think it's that he feels so sad that he couldn't fix things with Philippa. And I love the way that the music has let down his guard. It's like I don't know, it's like the music that plays the dog to sleep. Is it Cerberus or something?
Mm-hmm.
Music is the thing that gets through all his defenses. After Kate's been hammering on the door and she can't get in, he just got the music, and then like she gets in through the back door, and suddenly he's like spilling his guts.
Yep.
Yeah, and then they have this conversation, which I think is so real, about being competent about things, and how much do you show your competence to the world, and does that, there's a point where Lymond says you've got, it crosses 383 to 384 where he says, like Paris, they have three choices. People who are like generally competent, they can be to be accomplished but ingratiating, to be accomplished but resented, or to hide behind the more outre of their pursuits and be considered erratic but harmless. So you can either be accomplished and kiss ass, suck up to people. You can be accomplished and everyone hates you because you're good at everything. Or you can hide how good you are and just sort of pop up with stuff, be competent randomly, and people think you're weird and harmless. And none of those are very good options.
I mean, you just get these little hints of it here, but his childhood was not that great. And you get, like, it's at the start of 383 when she asks who taught him how to play. My mother first. My father thought that not only did music make men mad, but that only madmen indulged in it in the first place. So you see right away what must have been happening. You don't have all the pieces filled in, but between Sibylla, the father, Lymond, and Richard, that Richard was more like the father, that the father didn't like music, that Lymond is musical, that it was Sibylla that was nurturing him, and that his father that was rejecting him. And you have suddenly the ingredients that explain what's going on between these brothers, why Richard resents that Sibylla paid more attention to Lymond, but then how Lymond is hurt by, the way his father was, and probably has a similar, or some, issues toward Richard. The father liked Richard better and the mother liked Lymond better.
Right. Which is we talk about Dunnett using tropes and like common stories. I mean, this is Jacob and Esau. Like, that's what this is. It's Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. Like, that's the story. And Lymond is Jacob and Richard is Esau. And it's interesting because it kind of follows the story. I'm just realizing that right now. I'm like, oh wait, that totally fits.
I think there's a lot of brothers like that. They're compared in this chapter to Osiris and Set also.
Mm-hmm.
And
which would be Egyptian, right? Egyptian. That's an Egyptian story, yeah.
And Lymond actually brings up Cain and Abel during their sword fight. So
yeah.
I think Jacob and Esau works better because the parental love is part of that story. So Esau was loved by his father, Jacob was loved by his mother, and Jacob became exiled because of something that Esau did. And so I wonder how, and yet became very successful and then came back. So I don't know.
I'm gonna have to go read that story. I don't remember it. I probably got it in when I was 5 or something.
It's the grandchildren of Abraham So their father is Isaac, and then Jacob's son is Joseph of the coat of many colors. So it's that family. Oh, the Bible stories. Those are the ones I know.
I love the way that she breaks through his barriers. I love the way he's watching his fingers slipping down the keys. The music has brought down his defenses, and he's talking about his crimes, and he says his greatest crime was against his sister. And then he knows he's gone somewhere too far, too emotional, and he says, for God's sake, don't speak. And then he kind of explains it, and he kind of apologizes, and he says, as soon as the pressure was lifted, I started talking. I don't, as a rule, inflict my more tawdry reminiscences on people. You must believe me. I'm sorry. It's one of the penalties of being incommunicado for 5 years, but I can usually control it better than that. Which is like, I wasn't expecting him to say that, because he's been we were talking earlier, why won't he tell the truth? Why won't he talk to people? And we think it's, whatever reasons, but the idea that he actually just desperately wants someone to talk to and is trying to hold back did not occur to me.
Yeah, just that there's like these years of habit of having to be silent about what really matters to him, and then being unable to like having such habit of being closed off and
having been for 5 years with no one he could possibly trust, and having been betrayed, so that having put up all those walls, it's not like you can just take them down. Like there's other things that happen in future books that are like, but I feel like this is a similar one, like where even when he wants to connect, he can't.
Yeah, it's like the self-protective things that we develop when we're younger, which are necessary and needed and keep us safe. As we grow and things change, those self-protective habits like no longer serve us well, but we can't give them up, or it's hard to give them up.
Yeah, they're embedded in how we are toward the world.
Yeah.
And for him, like the inability to trust people and the extreme difficulty in connecting emotionally and saying what's really going on with him.
Right. Which as a slave would have served him very well. Like that would have been necessary and needed and essential. But then how do you shrug that off when you leave that state? And then you see Key, by the way, 384, you see his whole motivation for Richard, his everything he's been doing for Richard, which is when Kate asks him about having a normal life, he says that depends on Samuel Harvey. There is, of course, another thing. I might be able to gull the law, but as soon as I appear in public, my brother is likely to get himself hanged for killing me. So it's just, you see this, I can't do that because Richard's going to lose it. So.
What do you make of the last line in there? He says, don't worry. He said, answering what he took to be her anxiety. If it's going to happen, it won't happen here.
I think he misunderstands her question. Because I think her question was genuine. Like, how much more of this can you take? And he's thinking that she's asking, like, is something going to happen at my house? Are you going to lose it at my house? And he's like, no, don't worry. It's not going to happen here. Which, of course, is foreshadowing that it's absolutely going to happen there. But
not through his fault.
Not through his fault. And just that he doesn't realize that she's actually asking for him. Like, are you going to be okay?
Yeah.
I love the transformations of both Kate and Gideon, that they both start out like not able to stand him, and then very quickly they're so incisive and observant, and they see what he really is.
Which is another reason, by the way, I think Philippa might be something, because both of her parents have clearly become such lovely characters who are allies of Lymond. And anyway, I'm so intrigued about the books coming up. Okay, so then Gideon shows up, and basically you get this really lovely little tiny short scene that just emphasizes how much Kate and Gideon are both on Lymond's side. So Gideon's going to get him a horse to go to Samuel Harvey, and Kate's like, okay, you do that, I'll get the supplies he needs, you know. So they're both they're just 100% on his side now. And
I love that Gideon consults with her first before he helps Lymond. So you make sure, like, he didn't, you know, it wasn't terrible, and then make sure she's on the same page with him, and then they help.
Yeah, and then they're like, okay, you do this, I'll do this. And we'll, yeah. So, okay. Anything else there?
No, I just like how, as I said earlier, at the end of this little bit, as Lymond is leaving, Gideon says, "The fools, those damned fools at Edinburgh, what a waste of a man." He's showing, like, if they had just embraced him instead of pushing him out, exiling him, doing all of this thing, they may have the solution to all of their problems. Like, he's this excellent tactician. I think Gideon sees all of this right here and there. So,
yeah. And I think Gideon sees his moral core. Like, because I don't think Gideon would admire him if he just thought he was a good tactician. Like, he sees that Lymond cares about people and that he genuinely has Scotland's interest at heart. And that's why the people in Edinburgh are such idiots, because they have this tool that they're not using.
right. And they're actually actively pursuing him to punish him.
Yeah.
And they're so in need. They're in such danger. Like, the whole nation is in danger. And here's this incredibly, like, competent but also wise person who wants to help the country, and because they've pushed him away, they've lost this incredible ally.
Yeah, and not only is he competent and a good tactician and all of that, but he's also knowledgeable. Like, he just has a lot of fingers on a lot of pies, and he understands, you know, the best tactician in the world is going to be useless if they don't have correct information. And Lymond's got a lot of correct information. So
I find this to be a really interesting book series to read now, because it is about what is our obligation to the greater good of our community and our, you know, as a nation, but in our group or whatever. And I don't know, like, in a time where, so, like, the people in power are just, you know, fighting for scraps and looting the country, this idea that you have an obligation to do good for, you know, the greater good of other people is actually what the first time I read it, like 15 years ago, didn't seem that progressive, but now it seems really progressive.
yeah. Well, also, I feel like there's a concept of country and community that's so different from, like you said, from what we live with now. Like, people talk about, like, patriotism in the United States today, but they don't mean a loyalty toward the collective good. Like, that's not what's meant by I'm a patriot of the United States. It's not about this group of people that encompass this country are a priority for me, which I think that's what it was here. And the idea of, like, home and country included a deep idea of service. And I don't think our concept of patriotism today includes service.
Yeah. No, it's more just something like you wave for.
Right. It's more about, like, identity. Like, I am this thing, and therefore I am owed something because I have this identity.
Or I am better than the other group of, you know, border.
Yeah.
A lot of that.
Which we clearly don't agree with.
Yeah.
Nope.
Keep going.
Okay, so oh yeah, it's me. Okay, so then we switch scenes completely to this whole bit with Will Scott and Richard and Watt. Yeah. So yeah, we get Will Scott coming in, and Richard they have a little discussion. They send Will Scott out of the room, basically implying
he can't be trusted.
He can't be trusted to hear this stuff.
I wonder why.
Which, you know,
Oh, one thing to highlight before Will leaves the room is, Richard is being a total dick and like manhandling him, and he grabs him on the shoulder. And it says Will reacted as he had been taught. With one smooth, violent movement, he was out of the other's grasp and viewing him from a useful distance. And I love how she doesn't just tell you Will has changed and matured and learned so much. She shows you just in a little moment like that how much he has changed, how much he learned from his time with Lymond.
Yeah. So his wrestling grappling moves have
definitely improved.
Greatly improved. Yeah. Well, and the fact he's able to do it to Richard, who we know is a really good fighter. And we even see that later in the chapter. So Will Scott's skills are definitely highlighted there. Yeah. And then they have this whole discussion about where's Lymond. And I love this. He escaped. Richard's like, from Three? Like, what? It's like saying he got out of the tower? Like, like somehow I'm guessing Three has a reputation of being like super impregnable.
And also, I love how, Richard's like demanding that Will take them to Lymond, and Will is like, I already brought him to you at the beginning of the month. How often am I supposed to repeat this?
Come on. Yeah.
Not my problem you weren't there, Richard. So he's like, it's not my problem you weren't there when we had him the first time.
That's right. You do your part thing. I sort of love the fact that we get yet another little glimpse of how Watt is not very astute with people, because we have this little bit where it struck Sir Watt too late that it was no use to ingratiate with his lordship any man who'd witnessed his wife and brother together. And so Watt's like, oh crap, I shouldn't have mentioned that.
I feel like how they're standing in the room with Will and he says, you see Will's back? Said Sir Watt unnecessarily.
Right. There he is.
Yeah. He's so cute. I love it.
And then we get this discussion of the French, which they start to discuss, and then they're like, we can't talk about it here. And Will clearly knows, like, all right, he's like, yeah, I guess I'm suspect. I'll go. And then he kind of flounces out of the room. It's like the door bangs. So he like slams, he walks out of the room and slams the door. And then Buccleuch is pissed at Richard, basically. He's like, you didn't need to do that. And then they lay out the plan, which is to send the young queen to France, and to be brought up in the French court, and she's supposed to marry the Dauphin, the heir to the French throne.
Which, as we've discussed, we know historically is going to happen.
Plan, yeah. So she's gonna leave for France. I think she set sail in the beginning of August. I wrote it down. August 1548. So, and
it's like the end of June right now.
I think so. We're sometime in like early summer-ish.
Yeah.
So either if they agree, then the French will help them. If they don't, then the French are just going to leave Scotland to their own devices. And basically they just have this discussion about how they're in between a rock and a hard place. Like, they don't align with the French is not necessarily what they want to do, but the alternative is that they're going to get overrun by the English, and so that's terrible too. So they just do. They're
not going to go with the French.
Yeah, they're just going to go with the French. It seems like the lesser of two evils in this case. So then there's a little mention of Sibylla, and Richard's like, basically, I don't care where my mother is. So I have no idea where she is, and I haven't seen her for some time. And then Buccleuch says, she's got your wife back at Midcoulter. So Marietta and Sibylla are back at Midcoulter. And he said, have you ever thought that your brother might be driving a wedge deliberately between you and your family? Because if so, he's finding you easy meat. In other words, Buccleuch's like, dude, this is what's happening. And Richard's like, whatever.
Yeah, we talk about Lymond. Yeah, we talk about Lymond having walls, but Richard has put up a wall against all common sense at this point, and his friends are like, dude, like, come on.
Yeah. Especially what he does later. Oh my God, I was even madder at Richard in this chapter than I was when he had that initial fight with Mariana. But we'll get there.
Oh yeah, Richard has lost his freaking mind.
Yeah, Richard is out of it. So, it's agreed that in 8 days' time, 4 galleys would lift anchor in the Forth and sail not south, but around the north coast of Scotland, stopping at Dumbarton on the west, where the Queen would embark. So while Lord Grey and the English fleet rubbed and fretted at an empty mouse hole, the galleys of France would be sailing safely home, which feels like is not going to happen because historically the Queen left in August. So I feel like they're not close enough to August for this plan to work yet.
Stop Googling history, Dee.
Huh?
Stop Googling history, Dee.
I did. I feel like people would know that. It's not.
No, even the Scottish aren't going to know what month she sailed in.
Oh, come on. Maybe they will. So I didn't Google anything extra. I didn't Google anything this week. I've stayed away from it. But I can't forget what I already know. So I feel like there's going to be some sort of wrinkle in the plan in some way, which would make sense because we got 3 more chapters to go, or 2 more chapters to go. So oh, and then the hammer drops. So the English are not going to ransom Christian back. They want a traitor for Lymond, who the Scots do not have. So, poor Tom.
Love it.
And then we get to George in this scene where Lymond shows up at George Douglas's.
I love how everyone's in Edinburgh at this point. Richard and Lymond are both in Edinburgh. They're probably not that far away from each other.
Yeah. Yeah, these are all neighborhoods, right, of Edinburgh. So, like, George Douglas is at Lawn Market, which, in the Lawn Market, he walked there from Holyrood. So, yeah, they're probably not that far from each other.
I mean, medieval Edinburgh is walkable. You know, it's not a big.
Yeah.
I love that Lymond here. Lymond was very tired. It was clear in his face, and in the steel undisguised through the velvet of his voice. It was the opposite of how he was in the beginning. You couldn't tell if he was tired. You couldn't tell what was really going on. So again, we're seeing the facade slip. Like the reality is starting to bleed through the mask.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Is this the point where I think I forgot to underline something? Where is this the scene? Oh yeah, it is. Wait. No, there's a scene where somebody accuses Lymond of attempting to kill Richard, and Lymond physically responds to that accusation. Is that in this scene?
Not in this scene. It's a little
okay.
bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's later.
But there is a Lymond physically responds in this scene, which is when it's on the beginning of 390. When
he spun around.
Yeah, when Douglas says, "You know, Grey is bartering the Stuart girl's life for you," the reaction this time was instant. Lymond spun around, stopped himself, and put his empty glass on the table. So you have again, the facade is slipping. You have a completely honest physical reaction of, oh my God, Christian.
Yeah.
And again, an almost instantaneous change of plans in order to come to the rescue.
Yep. So he is going to accompany George Douglas's courier and letters to Grey from Douglas and go exchange himself for Christian, or at least try to rescue her.
There's a theme in this scene. It starts at the bottom of 289. Sir George asks him, "What will you do?" And he says, "Eat, sleep, and spend money, I expect. What else does anyone do?" And then at the end, when he decides to go, and George asks him if he's really going, and he says, "Of course I shall go. Why else was I born?" So you have this kind of transformation that he goes through in this scene where he shows up thinking Harvey's still alive and he's still got a chance of redeeming his name. He finds out that Harvey's dead. He realizes he has no hope of ever redeeming his name. He doesn't know what he's going to do with his life. He's just like, eat, sleep, and spend money. Like there's nothing, there's no meaning, there's just existence. And then he finds out that Christian's life is at risk and the only way to save her is to sacrifice himself. And he's like, this is it. This is what my life is for. I will give myself for her.
Yeah, so he goes off with the intention of rescuing Christian or exchanging himself for Christian. We don't know which. He probably doesn't know which. And we hit section 2, the tragic moves. So,
if that's not a foreshadowing right there.
yeah, this is bad. It's going to be bad. Bad things will happen.
I love the way Dunnett. I don't know how. I don't know what this strategy is called technically. Maybe Dee does, but the way that she gives you the day as the opposite of what it means. So the day is beautiful. The day was breathless with promise, and it's this beautiful, promising day. There's so much hope and possibility, and then what actually happens is loss and tragedy.
That is the textbook definition of irony. What you expect to happen, like the expected thing based on the observation that you've made, and something else happens. So, yeah, and she's good at it. So now we have the spy has been discovered, or a spy has been discovered, and so this plan with the Queen and the French and it's in a letter, and that letter is traveling. They caught the spy, but this letter is traveling with the courier and going to Grey. So they're going to trace it. So then we get this like chase scene, which it's almost like a car chase out of an action film, but it's a bunch of guys on horseback, and they're just like, they're going here, and then they're right behind him, and then they're going to the next town, and they're right behind him. It just keeps going. So,
well, and they're slowly finding out that it's them, you know, and the description gets more and more accurate until Richard's like, it's one of them is Lymond.
So the guy on the chestnut horse is my brother.
That just spurs him on even more to like, not only are we getting the spy, but the spy is Lymond, which is not a correct assumption, but of course he's going to jump there because it's Lymond.
Right. So we have Adam Atchison is the courier and the betrayer, and Lymond is going with him because they have letters of safety or passage or whatever they call it. And
this whole thing actually makes perfect sense, because I remember the first time I read it thinking it's kind of a coincidence that the letter of betrayal is with Lymond. Like Lymond just happens to end up with that guy. But then I realized that this is George Douglas. He's trying to play both sides between England and Scotland. He managed to accidentally piss off the English so much that they attacked his home. So now he's got to get back on their good side and get his hostages back because they've got his kid. So he's not only is he sending Lymond along to be like, hey, you know, look at this, but he's also sending the information about the Queen. So actually what was happening was he was sending the information about the Queen to the English, and he's sweetening the pot by giving them Lymond too, to get them back on his side to, you know, basically do his Douglas thing and look out for himself above all others.
And Lymond, it makes sense that Lymond's going along with this because his end goal is to go to the same spot, and if he goes with the courier, then he's able to get through the English lines way easier because
he has no idea about the letter.
Right. Yeah.
They have letters of passage with them as well that will give them safe conduct. So
it's just easier for him to go with the courier. So we got this chase scene. They're going as fast as possible. Both sets of people are going as fast as possible. So the two hunted men race south, followed by their pursuers. And then we get this scene. So, like, Kristen Stewart is being moved further south. She had spent more time with Samuel Harvey than she had allowed to appear. So she is definitely doing something with Samuel Harvey, which makes us as the readers go, wait, maybe there's a chance. You know, that Harvey's dead, but Christian did something. So, but while Lymond and Richard and the whole shebang are getting close to the border, Christian is moving farther away and arrived at Warkworth Castle. So she is this whole bit with her is basically her trying to not be outmaneuvered by Margaret, and Margaret trying to figure out everything that Christian has done and what she's doing. And like, I wouldn't go so far as to say she gets played by Margaret, but Margaret is definitely able to figure out, like, Margaret knows what's going on, and she's able to figure out what Christian's intentions were, and she knows that she spent time with Samuel Harvey, and she figures out that Christian has what ends up to be a confession, supposedly. So, but I don't necessarily think that Christian made like foolish mistakes or anything. She was just in a position of very, very little power, and she can't see. So
I think also she didn't make any mistakes, and none of it's her fault. But we can trace back and see how it happened. When she and Gideon had their exchange, and Gray was listening, and he heard Harvey's name, and then he happened to mention Harvey to Margaret, and Margaret is like she's like a laser focused on this bitter vengeance. And yeah, and so as soon as she gets this idea that this could have something to do with Lymond, and how dare this blind girl have a relationship with him when he doesn't want me anymore because I'm rotten. She's just vicious and unstoppable.
Yeah. So that, I mean, the whole phrase like dog with a bone, like she's just not giving it up.
And we see her, her tactics. How does she ultimately find out what happened? She takes a young man and gets him drunk and manipulates him into telling her.
Right.
And very possibly seduces him as well.
I know, it's so gross.
I really read that into it. I was like, ew, Margaret.
I hate her so much, you guys.
Yeah. I was wrong to like her in the beginning. Very, very wrong.
It's not your fault, though. You don't know at the beginning what she is.
Yeah, she's really terrible. But so I love this bit where Gideon and Christian are like desperately trying to very, very quickly, like they're trying to fix this. They're trying to figure out a way to help Lymond, and they're trying to do it without getting caught and without anybody knowing what they're doing. And like Gideon is so on Lymond's side, which is somewhat confusing because he's definitely English, but he's also such a good guy, and we like him.
He's just a good person who's recognized another good person with integrity and is behaving as a human rather than as a, person of war.
Yeah, so they're trying to figure out, like, how can we stop Lymond? And the interesting thing is what they're trying to stop Lymond from doing is this self-sacrificial act of giving himself up for Christian. And so they're like, how can we stop him from doing this thing that, yeah, and then there's just this sad, sad thing that Gideon wasn't with Christian and Margaret at the front of the caravan, and he blames himself, and
of course that's the moment that I knew. I was like, oh, Christian.
Yeah.
It's like something's gonna happen to you real soon.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like, I think both Gideon and Lymond feel responsible for Christian's death, and neither of them were the responsible party, but they both feel that.
I also I like it as a literary tactic that Dunnett starts dropping these hints. There was one at the end of the last section about Johnny Willow being too late, and then there's this about Gideon being unable to forgive himself. So she kind of gives us these like retrospective things that create in you the fear. This is how she's building up the tension, and she's building up your fear, and she's also transitioning the book from what had been really comedic and kind of lighthearted to a much, much darker obviously story, and she's like taking you along with her, so it's not like out of nowhere that it suddenly gets so dark.
Yeah. So then we get to this bit where Acheson and Lymond are waylaid, if you will, and they basically blindfold Acheson and he's captured. And so at this point, Lymond clearly knows something's amiss. And he takes Atchison blindfolded.
I don't think he knows. I think he's just taking him with him because he can't. He's saying he can't leave him to tell others that he's in the neighborhood.
Yeah, but he could just like tie him up and take him with him. Like he's blindfolded him, disarmed him, mounted, and let up. Like I feel like it's a little bit of an overkill just to like, I don't want you to run away and tell people.
But he doesn't want him to know that he's going to Gideon's, because if Aitchison says that he was taken to Gideon's, it could implicate Gideon. So basically Lymond just doesn't want him out there letting anyone on as aware Lymond is, and he doesn't want to get Gideon in trouble, so he's just carrying this guy along with him blindfolded as like a, just,
can't kill him because he's a good guy. So
just take him with me, keep him in it, and then eventually he'll go on his way.
Okay.
I like also the beginning. It's right at the start of that, the top of 396. It says the most hardened of them all raised himself on an elbow, meaning like it's Richard's men, the Lennox people, and Lymond and Aitchison. Everybody's all actually relatively near each other. But the most hardened one, I would have thought is Lymond after everything we had built up, but it's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's and this guy, you get this sense of Atchison as just like completely like he doesn't care about anything. And he doesn't get a very big character description, but in a very short amount of text, Dunnett tells us that this guy is 100% out for himself and doesn't care about loyalty to anyone or anything. He's just going to make it through.
She has to set it up so that you don't really care that much that Lymond has to kill him for the greater good.
This is also the point, we don't find this out till later, but this is the point where he switches the letters. So it makes it look like Lymond was the one that was carrying the dispatch about the queen going to France.
Yeah.
Puts it in his bedroll.
Yep. So they go to Flaw Valleys. I'm intrigued. I'm wondering if you actually pronounce it that way. Sometimes there's location names in Britain and Scotland that our American English pronounces. It looks like a regular word, but you pronounce it a completely different way.
The Scottish audiobook reader says Flaw Valleys.
Okay. I will take your word.
It's also a fictional place.
Oh, right. But it could be one of those things like in Wales, the word key is pronounced quay or something like that. Like
it's spelled quay.
It's spelled quay and pronounced key.
In England too. There was a subway stop called Surrey Quays that I kept saying that, and finally one of my roommates was like, Surrey Keys? I was like, oh, yeah, that one.
I mean, we do it too. I guess it's like Houston and Houston. Like,
I didn't know that was only in the UK. I thought that was just how you pronounce it.
I have no idea. I don't think I've seen it in the US.
There's a thing key in Cardiff where Torchwood and Doctor Who.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. But I've never seen it in the US. I don't think we use that word as for like a bay or a shore something. Yeah, I know. That's because Yanto. There's a memorial.
We went to it.
I went to it. Yeah.
Memorial.
There's a picture of me underneath the memorial for Yanto because I'm still sad about that.
Who isn't?
I didn't really.
That's another video podcast, but
yes.
For anyone watching who's into Torchwood, I'm still mad about Yanto. Okay. So then we get back to Christian, and we find out that Margaret has manipulated Simon into telling her everything. And Simon very unwisely jumps on Christian's horse and rides her away in an attempt to escape. He's shot and dies, and Christian feels him die, and she is stuck blind on a galloping horse with a dead body on the horse, and this leads to disaster. The horse goes over a cliff basically and dies, and she is crushed in the fall probably by the horse. Yeah.
one thing I hadn't realized until later was that it's actually Hadrian's Wall that the horse is running toward.
Oh.
I wondered when they were talking about the wall. I was wondering if it was
In the 1500
like one of the ancient Romans.
1500 years of like brush that's built up that covers the ditch, so that the horse doesn't realize it's a ditch. Because it's Hadrian's Wall is that old.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because it is right there if you look at the map in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
They just call it the Roman Wall, but we know that it's Hadrian's Wall.
So then there's this really interesting paragraph. They're lifting Christian Stewart, and Lady Lennox, so Margaret goes to the horse, and she immediately finds what she was looking for, which is Gideon's confession. So it says, the cloth gave up its secret immediately. She pulled out a small bundle of papers, separated them, glanced on both sides, made a curious sound so close to a laugh that Gideon turned sharply on her. She was refolding the same papers and stuffing them back into the lining where they'd been hidden. She did it quite carefully and then stood up, dusting her hands. So clearly, I read this paragraph like 3 times trying to figure out, okay, so she finds this paper that Christian was so glad to have gotten and that Christian thought was going to save Lymond. She looks at it carefully, flips it over, laughs, or at least Gideon thinks she laughs, and then she folds it up and puts it back. So clearly, whatever she finds, she thinks is funny and isn't going to hurt her and isn't going to help Lymond. But I wasn't completely sure. Like, I read that paragraph 3 times because I was trying to figure out if she switched the papers, but Dunnett clearly said she was refolding the same papers and stuffing them back into the lining. But it's still from Gideon's perspective. So, although I'm like 95% sure that the papers that they look at Christian's deathbed are the actual papers, there's a little tiny bit of me that still wonders if Margaret's sleight of hand switched them. But she laughed, so I think
the laugh tells you.
Yeah. She just saw it and she's like, ha, that's hilarious, and then puts him back because
she's so evil.
She's so mean.
Yeah, and you see that Gideon is totally aware of what's going on. His last line, "Was that her sin?" said Gideon, watching the cavalcade move off. "I'd come to fancy it might be something quite different." So he sees like the jealousy that Margaret has for Christian, that Lymond has paid attention to this girl and has done whatever he did in the past to Margaret.
Well, and Margaret, like, obviously she's super evil, but her line about Christian's death is like super evil. I mean, she just says she was blind. It's too great a handicap. She's better out of it. So she's better dead than blind, which is just super evil.
I mentioned recently how much I hate her.
Yeah, she's very worthy of hate.
I'm glad you didn't tell us right away how much you hated her, because that would have been spoilery, but now I see and now I know.
But it's really set up for you to not know, so that you figure it out throughout the book, and you don't know what to think of Lymond at that point, and her, it could be him that's the rotten one when they first meet.
Okay, so then Lymond comes back, and he's bringing Adam with him, and Gideon tells him of Christian's accident. There's been an accident. Kate's with her, and they go to her deathbed.
This part kills me because the reason Lymond's coming back is because Gideon had sent his men to watch the hills for Lymond, because he'd had that conversation with Christian and they're trying to prevent Lymond from sacrificing himself. And when Lymond shows up, we find out that the men told him that Christian had something that would redeem him. And so he shows up having basically given up, right? Because we saw that transformation he went through with George Douglas, where he was like, I have no chance of redeeming my name. My life has no meaning. okay, I'm going to die for Christian. So he's like, my life has no meaning except to die. And then suddenly he gets this ray of hope from Gideon's men that intercept him. And so he comes in all bouncy with an electric vigor, and he's ebullient, and he's so excited and just like babbling, you know, with all these like excited quotes. Like he's finally got a chance. He could redeem his name. He can still save Christian. And then he sees Gideon's hesitation and like slowly figures it out and like transforms. And there's this line that just kills me: however much the flesh might shrink and melt, the sarcophagus was decently void of temperament. He's become, you know, the human is just you know, broken, but he's got this like hard stone shell that's all you can see.
Yeah, and then there's this next bit where Gideon says he'll take him to Christian. He says, "Thank you." An automatic reply and an automatic climbing of the stairs. So it's just like he's on autopilot. Like he's not really thinking about things. There's just like the blonde face was lightly sheened with perspiration, but it was a warm day. There was no tremor of sentiment in it. So he's not showing, you've said before, he's not showing any emotion on his face, but he's definitely feeling it. And so then we have Christian's deathbed, where she is completely aware of what's happening. She knows exactly, like she knows that she's dying. Her mind is completely unobscured. She's and there's just this beautiful moment where Christian's like, "I've got something for you. Look at this thing that I got." And her face, it says her face, for the first time, this is on 403, for the first time Lyman's eyes met Kate. He rose slowly and walked to the door. Kate heard her husband speak in the corridor, and then both men's footsteps receding. After no more than a few minutes, Lyman returned. This time his eyes never left the girl in the bed. Sitting beside her, he raised her hand and put under it a crumpled fold of small papers, blood-stained, Kate thought, in one corner. Christian's face was alight. "You've read them? They're all there?" "I've read them. But how," Lyman was saying in kind of lunatic daze, how the devil could you do it? To have it in black and white at the 11th hour? Did you threaten him, cut off his ears and souse them in vinegar, propose to confine him in a locked room with Lord Grey for 6 months? Which was funny. The girl gave a ghost of a laugh. So like even now he's trying to like make her laugh and be supremely kind to this woman who's dying. She replies, "It was on his conscience. Is it in, the priest was there. That's the second signature. Is it what you hoped?" And he replies, he picks up her hand and carried it to his lips, holding it afterward folded in both his own. "More than I ever dreamed of," he said. And then you see Kate looks up. Horror-struck is the word from what her lifted hand revealed, that the pages were blank. And it's just, oh.
And Lyman looks at her like the serpent she had once called him, snarled voicelessly into Kate's eyes. So meaning,
don't say.
Don't let on that it's blank.
Absolutely not.
And Kate knows what he's doing, because that next line is, "Kate gave nothing away," period.
Yeah. I think this scene tells us so much about Lyman, about his empathy and his insight into people and his compassion and his humanity. And like, if you don't love him after this, how can you not love him?
Yeah, and he faced like this ultimate devastation of both his last, like this last hope that was given to him crushed, and this woman that he cares about is dying, and he can't show emotion about any of it. And yeah,
there's 2 other bits in this that I like that I'll just highlight. One is when she talks about how she didn't expect to die so far from home without any of her own people, and he says, "Don't be so superior, someone of your own is here," which just breaks my heart, when he is her own. And we know he called her a familiar spirit. Even though whatever he's an outlaw, like they are each other's own, as dear friends, if nothing else. And then also there's a little bit where she has insight into what is going to happen with him, or what could happen with him. He makes this comment, she makes this comment about his prophecy. This is a prophecy that he gave her in the tent about how she should get all she wanted from life. And she says she thinks the prophecy has come true. And he has a reply that's quite bitter, actually. And it goes back to his thing about the meaning of his life. There seems to be no doubt I've been reserved for great things. The flames of this fire never touch me, he gives this quote. And it says the impact of the words was almost physical. Kate flinched and the girl in the bed cried out, no. And then he broke off and says, no, God knows why you think it's worth it, but I wouldn't have the puny effrontery to waste what you've done. So she has an idea, and then she makes him promise, like, the way her life can have meaning is if his life has meaning, because she's sacrificed for him. So he shouldn't go give it up in an alcoholic haze or go out in a blaze of glory. Like, he needs to keep living. And I think she has a great insight, because there is this risk that he could just break and give up and not be able to keep going. And then her life would have been wasted for nothing. And I love how in so few words, Dunnett gives you so much of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And they even make this, and again, like, I think Lymond, in the midst of all of this, also trying to make her smile a little bit, like, says that bit about if Agnes Harries ever stumbles upon a glossa interrun, and if Agnes Harries basically ever figures out what we were doing in those letters, like, there's gonna be a civil war. And she's like, don't worry, Tom made her burn the letters. So, which you get a sense that Christian actually had Tom make Agnes burn the letters, because why would Tom do that, So yeah, he just
and it's so sweet, and it's so because they were like the light in the story, and it was so lighthearted. All of their scenes together were sweet and innocent, and the fact that this sweet and innocent relationship has come to this terrible tragedy just like kills you.
Yeah. So then basically Christian asks for the end of the song, and so Lymond goes in the next room to play music, and she asks Kate to stay with her, and Kate stays with her, and she dies. And then a whole bunch of people show up.
Yes.
Before we do that, she asked him to finish the song about the frog. Remember that song we were talking about? And in that song, the frog dies and the mouse dies. So it's a really dark foreshadowing in that children's song. And then the fact that he plays the music, the fury of hope and joy that towered in the notes, outburning the sunlight and outpouring the volumes of the sea. He gives everything into this music, and you understand that he is both a profoundly, like, deeply feeling person, and that he's able to express it through music. So even though he has a struggle to express himself in words sometimes, his true self comes out in the music. And then the fact that this whole time that she's dying and he's playing the music, he's watching his brother's men ride up, and he's watching Philippa point and say he's in there, and he knows that he's going to get captured and that he's presumably going to die, and he just lets it happen because he's not going to stop playing the music, and he's not going to let Christian be afraid. So we got all this martyrdom foreshadowing, and here it is, like,
yeah, he could have taken this time to escape, but that's not who Lymond is at all.
And there's this lovely line about her death, like right when it happens, where it says, Christian died in the midst of the music, purposeful and successful. The last struggle unseen by anyone but Kate, and laying no bridle on the living. And just that idea that as Christian dies, like, bridle being like something that would guide someone somewhere, like, and her death, like, she leaves no obligation on anyone. And there's no, like, she dies without causing more strife, you know. That way of saying that was so simple and sad. Okay, so then all the men show up.
Richard, man, the way that Richard shows up, can I just say, is absolutely terrifying. This is like something out of an epic nightmare story. Broad, powerful, shivering within the frame of smashed wood, he was a primitive figure of pantheistic and dreadful force. Really scary. He's actually terrifying when he shows up.
Yeah.
I totally had flashes of Jack Nicholson in The Shining at this moment, like bashing his way through the door.
Yeah. And just Kate's, like, obviously being, since anyone else sort of screamed, but she stayed silent.
Not only stay silent, but I love this too, by lending Lymond the support of her calmness.
Mm-hmm.
She who hated him, you know, at the start of this chapter, is now a rock that's helping him to get through this terrible, you know, probably one of the worst moments of his life, if not the worst.
Right. And if he had responded in any way, like, Richard probably would have just stabbed him, like, right there. So, yeah. Okay. So then we get this whole, Kate, like, I love Kate. Get out of this room and listen to me, you uncivilized lout. She's like, and Richard just isn't, like, he's in a coma, like, just, I mean, think of laser focus, like we were talking about Margaret, like, Richard is just so focused. Yeah, he just can't, everything else is a fog, and he can't see.
He slaps her out of the way.
The what?
He slaps her out of the way.
Yeah, it's crazy, which is literally crazy, like, nuts. I mean, and everyone around him is kind of like, whoa.
Yeah.
Well, even later in the chapter, when they go to Hexham and Tom Erskine tells his men, don't let Richard follow me. Like,
yeah, right.
This dude has lost his damn mind.
He has lost it, and he's lost his damn mind, exactly.
So also right before that, I really like this as a, like, Lymond and Richard are having a different conversation in completely different spaces, and it's, like, unbridgeable. And I love the way that, you know, I was talking earlier, it's almost postmodern. Like, Lymond's been playing a role, and he knows he's playing a role, and he, like, it's almost like he knows he's in a story, and Richard's playing it straight, and Lymond knows it's not real. So he's like, I know, aha, aho, and every other bloody ejaculation, let's take it as read. You're delirious at the idea of manhandling me and can't wait to start. I may in turn say that I find your arrival offensive and your presence blasphemous, thus concluding the exchange of civilities and letting us get out of here. He's really just like, can we not play this story like this right now?
You know what this reminded me of, which was super off topic and weird, but there's an Austen scene, a Jane Austen scene, where it's Elizabeth and Darcy talking about how do you have small talk during a party, and Elizabeth's like, you might mention this and I might say that, and it's like that very you know, we're going to play this role, but we're going to be incredibly explicit about how we're playing it. And it's the exact same thing. Like, Lymond is doing in this scene the exact same thing that Lizzie Bennet does at the Netherfield Ball, where she's talking to Darcy about, like, you know, how should we talk during a dance? And
I've had these moments too where, like, I feel like I'm living in a cliche and everyone else is playing it seriously, and I'm just like, you know, in my head I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why are we
crazy?
This cliche? But, like, you can't say that when everyone else takes it seriously. You have to play along even though you know it's ridiculous.
Right. And it's like everything that we're doing here is just walking through the motions of this fake thing. Yeah. And I mean, it's not that Richard's emotions are fake, but that he's playing this role and he's gotten so caught up in the role that he's not paying attention to.
Well, Lymond was playing the role, but Richard,
and Lymond's playing the role too.
Responded as a real, like, Richard's not playing. This is what Richard really.
Yeah.
Right, but he's caught up in this. He's caught up in something that is fake.
Yeah.
And Lymond knows it's fake. Yeah. Richard doesn't know that it's fake, but Lymond knows that it's fake, which I guess is the satirical aspect of Austen that she's playing as well. That, like, certain characters understand that the social norms are fake, and other characters don't. So yeah.
The other thing that happens throughout this scene is you notice is that the whole time Lyman is really worried about Tom. Lyman is trying to protect Tom. He's trying to get Tom out of the room. He's trying to stop Tom
Right.
from finding Christian's body in a really awful way. Even in the midst of this horrible thing happening to him, he barely knows Tom, and yet he's trying to protect Tom.
Right. And he knows, it's almost like most of what he knows about Tom is the fact that Christian agreed to marry him, which speaks again of how much he respects Christian, because if she agreed to marry this guy, then he must be a good guy. And yeah. So it doesn't work because Richard's an idiot. And so Tom does find Christian's body, and it's like Lyman's long fingers shot out and halted him. It's again that reference to his hands. There's bad news. We tried to tell you it's Christian. And Erskine broke from his grasp without a sound. So yeah, leaving Tom where he, and then it's like Lord Coulter moved from the bedside, leaving Tom where he knelt. So Tom had like collapsed at the side of Christian's bedside. Which, oh.
And Tom spends that whole scene to the end, like there in front of Christian's bed, and then Kate comes and tells him what happened, and you have, thank God it was Kate, you know, these two very humane people communicate with each other, and Kate explains it.
Right, and Kate just, you know, being able to tell him like nothing untoward happened with Lyman and Christian, like they were, and that she is incredibly kind, and like, and that I was supposed to tell you of her love, and like that she passes on a message that Christian was thinking of him. And yeah, and then just Kate's very last thing about him, he was very nearly good enough for you, that one, you know, and just like, we know that she's a good judge of character, and so it just speaks again of Tom.
And the way that ends, and drawing the yellow curtains shut out the sun.
Yeah,
it's very beautifully written. It's so written with such beauty and such dignity, even like in the midst of this, you know, grotesque image of Richard barging through and a stupid petty battle, but then Christian has such dignity, and Tom and Lyman and Kate.
Yeah.
I really feel though that this scene and the way he's treated, the way, you know, he sees from the past what Christian said about Lyman when it was discovered that she was helping him, and how Kate, you know, gives him the message. I feel that this is what sort of compels Tom moving forward to do what he does towards the end of this chapter. Like if that hadn't been here, things may have ended completely differently.
Yeah, I completely agree that this Kate talking to Tom gives him a different perspective on Lyman.
Well, and also Tom found out in the previous chapter that Christian was helping Lymond. Mm-hmm. So I think it's like building up, even though for all intellectual reasons, he should be thinking Lymond is a villain. The fact that what he's experiencing from Kate and from Christian and what he's seeing is that there's more going on here.
And he's the one that keeps advocating for Lymond and trying to keep Richard from just outright murdering him. He'd be like, no, you have no cause. You have to do it this way. This is how English law prescribes. You could kill him, but then you'll get arrested and possibly hung as well. Especially since you're not in Scotland. You're in England right now.
Right. And not for nothing, it's interesting that Dunnett has like the fulcrum of these events sort of moves on the opinions of women, that it's Christian's opinion of Lyman and Kate's opinion of Lyman, and at times Sibylla's opinion of Lyman, that moves the story, like that is a key moment in various points, which I like.
For sure. I love the way that women are completely equal participants, even though they don't have the same kind of official power.
Yeah, that they have a lot of what we would call soft power. It's all through the story. Okay, so we kind of are running out of time a little bit. We've only got like 35 minutes. So we've got this big fight scene with Richard and Lymond, and they are going to have a very, very traditional combat to the death, which sort of eventually gets moved into like the duel, the like pistols at dawn kind of thing. But at this point in history, it is a sword and dagger fight, and it's really prescribed. Like, that was one thing that I don't think I'd realized, was like how much ceremony was involved in this kind of fight. So they have this very religious ceremony before the fight where they grab each other's hands and hold on to the Bible and talk about like going into the fight, where you go into the fight with nothing more than God, your body, and the merits of your quarrel. And the idea that how good your argument is part of the fight. Like, if you are on the side of right, then you will win, which the cynical part of me says that's ridiculous. The better swordsman is going to win. But that was a genuine belief of the time, that God would be on the side of the person who is in the right, and that the strength of their argument would be part of the strength of their fight. It's kind of beautiful, actually, although
very biased in favor of the toughest, strongest one.
Yeah, in a macabre sort of way.
Yeah.
And I love that Lymond basically refuses to fight. Richard goads him and goads him and goads him about all of this stuff, and he refuses to fight up until the point where Richard begins to disparage Christian's reputation. And at the point where he brings Christian into this disparaging of Lymond, that's when Lymond agrees to do this fight. And up until that point, he wasn't going to. So his own reputation is not, even though that's been motivating him this whole time, but it is not enough to make him go into this duel. But the disparaging of Christian is.
And even when he goes into the duel, he only defends himself.
Yeah.
Right, and he doesn't actually.
The only thing that can motivate him to actually fight his brother is suddenly when the entire country becomes at risk, and
right.
then he has to put his country over his family.
Yeah.
When Adam is seen escaping.
Yeah. Yeah. So the courier escapes, or the spy escapes, and then they're having this beautiful sword fight, and they're dancing around, and all the audience of men are like, they fight like the skilled swordsmen. It's like they're watching a football game, and it's like the skilled sportsmen are doing this and doing that, and it's almost like you hear this announcer in your head of all of the moves that they're making and everything, and then
it's like art. It
is this art, and then Erskine figures out that Lymond is not actually fighting, and he basically says, like, if both of you don't fight, we're gonna call it off.
Mm-hmm.
But then Richard, by the way, at one point says he fights like a textbook. So which is a criticism that you hear a lot in fiction, that someone is like textbook, but not creative or passionate in their fighting. So like if someone is fighting precisely against an opponent who's fighting creatively, the creative fighter will win. I don't know if that's true in reality, like I don't know how that works in real life, but in fiction that's how that works. If someone is described as fighting with precise technique, they're gonna lose to the person who's fighting with creative technique, like 100% of the time.
I don't know if you noticed that there was like a couple chapters ago, because it's the last chapter when Sibylla is lecturing Marietta that you need to ask Richard about his own interests if you want him to be interested in you. And one of the things that Sibylla mentions is that he's the best swordsman in the country.
Right.
He actually teaches other noble,
Yeah, I remember that. But And we also don't see how good Lymond is. Like, there's a couple points in this fight where it's clear that Lymond is holding back and he's playing with Richard. He's not showing his true skill.
But at the end, Lymond goes all out and he is equally challenged. Like, this is a match. Yeah. Either one of them could have won.
Yeah. So they're both good in different ways. And then okay, so
before we go too far into it, I wanted to mention on 411, you were asking about the part where Lymond made a sudden involuntary movement, and it's
yeah, I underlined it. Yeah, that's the one, right? Where I think it supports Philippe's idea about about Dandy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where Lord Coulter said, he has degraded our family name, committed theft and arson, and attacked a guest beneath my roof. He has tried to take my life repeatedly. Lymond made a sudden movement, apparently involuntarily, and the gesture restored Richard's voice. He said quite clearly, he's dishonored my wife and killed my only son. And so...
I mean, he was right about the first part. He did commit theft and arson, and he did attack Janet Buccleuch in their own hall. So.
Right. But then it's he's tried to take my life repeatedly, and Lymond kind of goes, what? So I think that supports Philippe.
If Lymond didn't shoot that third arrow, does Lymond know that that third arrow was actually shot?
Yeah, he talks about it. Yeah. I take this as he's surprised that Richard believes that he really was trying to murder him.
Okay. So, like, you think that Richard would think, hey, he shot me in the shoulder, but he didn't mean to kill me?
I think that Lymond thinks that his brother knows him better than this, and that his brother knows that he wouldn't be trying to really kill him. I think he's hurt and surprised that Richard has completely bought into this idea that Lymond has been trying to destroy him.
So he just gets that, Lymond finally realizes that Richard's just around the bend about him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Since we just mentioned Andy Hunter, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but I really wanted to point out on 421, once Lymond sort of disarms Richard and is fleeing, one of the last things he says to Richard is, handy dandy prickly pandy, Richard. As like, Lymond picks his words for very specific reasons, and he very specifically said dandy at this point. So I'm wondering if he's trying to like throw a clue at Richard at that point. That's really the only thing other than what we just discussed that helps me with my theory in this chapter, because Andy Hunter is nowhere to be found in this chapter. But.
Speaking also of your references to the stories of brothers on 415, and also my references to Lymond playing a role, he says, since we are here, why not pronounce something appropriate? And he gives all these quotes, and this is where he refers to the killing of Cain and Abel. But all these quotes from things that are about brothers fighting. So he's like, we're just playing out a role in a story that's been told many times. And he clearly thinks the whole thing is ridiculous, and he's stuck in this part that he created and now he can't get out of. Also just want to highlight there's multiple religious symbols and sort of symbols of martyrdom. So on 414, when they do the vow, they're like vowing on a Bible and they're making a cross with their arms. And then at the end, when Richard does the killing move and Lymond stops it, he stops it with a crucifix. A beautiful line wherever it was.
Because his feet get caught up in the bedroll.
It fell on a crucifix of steel.
Yeah, so like his sword, he's got his dagger and his sword like this, and he like pops Richard's sword out of his hand doing that.
Yeah, it's just the most glorious imagery. Also, speaking of which, the sunlight is like a character in this scene. They're in this big hall with these windows. The light is shining in. It's just beautiful. The brilliant windows, the bright chestnuts beyond. The sun prinked and patterned the floor, aerialed the two white-shirted men standing widely separated, and fell upon itself, reflected in the steel with redoubled kisses.
And it mentions at some point too that one of the reasons that Lymond is able to hold Richard off is because he's using the sunlight and Richard isn't.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he's like reflecting it into his eyes.
Yeah, he's using the sunlight as an additional.
I always think of Hecate reflecting the light in your eyes.
Yeah. Yes.
And again, because this is all these men are watching this, but it's not just a sport. It's a work of art. Each of them in a cocoon of whirring light, a blizzard of suns on walls and ceiling enclose them. This is just freaking beautiful.
Okay, so Lymond disarms Richard, but he gives up his victory. And he asks Richard that question about which hand will you have, meaning do you want me to stab you with my sword or do you want me to stab you with the dagger? And then it says no one spoke. Coulter's gaze at this ultimate moment, ultimate meaning the end, so like the last moment, was steady and unafraid. Lymond laughed, and laughing hurled the rapier to the floor and leapt to the window seat, the baggage roll scooped in his arms. For a moment he was poised there, collected, elegant, fleetingly analytical, but has not dropped the dagger. Then, if you won't lead, try following, said the master. And in a storm of contemptuous glass, which is just great, swept the pack through the window and followed it himself. They heard as they ran forward the thud, the pause, and the quick recovery as he rolled on the soft grass below. From there, as they knew, it was a step to the horses, and so they had to follow. So he forces them to chase after the spy. Yeah.
Clever. It's really, really freaking clever because he's exhausted. It's really hard. I mean, it even says, perhaps for the first time in his life, Lymond was also stretched to the limit, his breathing ruckus, his concentration a tangible and frightening thing. This is not an easy manipulation that he gets Richard to do what he wants. He barely makes this happen, but he does. And it's brilliant. He gets out, he gets them all after him, and he is going to save Scotland, damn it.
Yeah. So they are riding hell for leather, as they say, after Adam. And it gets to the point where Erskine is the only one who's left, right? Because they hold Tom back. Tom basically tells his guys, like, yeah, don't let Richard go.
They hold Richard back, yeah.
Yeah, they hold Richard back. And it gets to the point where it's like Lymond, so it's Atchison gets to Hexham. Lymond's like 200 yards behind him, so not that far, but he doesn't catch up to him before he gets to the town. And Atchison does this like, yeah, the guy behind me's okay kind of thing. It's like, okay, sure. And then Tom is behind Lymond, so
about 5 minutes behind, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, so 5 minutes.
Tom bluffs his way in because he has the outer part of the letter.
Yeah.
And then Lymond literally try and kill Adam, but he doesn't realize he's wearing chainmail underneath. So.
Yeah. So he takes the dagger from the fight and does that, and then uses his horse as a weapon, which is completely legitimate. Like if he was on a war horse, like that horse would have known what to do. So yeah, frightening. And Adam is at death's doorstep, but not dead. And Erskine, there's this.
He's just knocked out.
Oh, he's just knocked out. Okay, so he's incapacitated.
But like knocked out for a while.
Yeah, he's pretty severely knocked out. So there's this interesting line about Tom though, where he's coming into Hexham and he says the decisive factor was whether he had to assassinate one man or two. So Tom is still completely unsure about Lymond, but he's unsure. Like he's not determined to kill Lymond. He just doesn't know if he's gonna have to.
Yeah. Well, this is such a revealing scene because he goes in and he's eavesdropping and he sees what's really going on between Lymond and the English. And it's a very clear view of Lymond is not an English ally.
Mm.
Yeah. So I love the way they have this whole like Erskine is sneaking around this. I think he's going up on the scaffolding and he's sneaking along a little ledge and he's
So I'm supposed to go to Edinburgh this year. I didn't, but I was supposed to go to Hexham Abbey, which I really, really want to go to so badly because the scene is so great. So I know we don't have a lot of time, but I will quickly show you some pictures of it. It's such a cool location.
Ooh.
This is where that scene happens, the night stair. And,
So is this the stair that Tom is on?
this is where the climax happens. You see it here again. So like, Margaret and the English, they're standing down here, and Lymond goes up the stairs, and Tom's up here. So you can see how Lymond would collapse, and he'd be hidden by this part of the, stair rail basically, and then you can see how Tom could drag him off, and they wouldn't notice it.
So then the guy with the pistol would have been like somewhere up on that balcony or up in the galleries up above, perhaps.
Yeah. It's such a cool location, and I so want to go and like retrace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
first of all, can I just say how much I love this, because Lymond goes in, and the English are all in there, and they're all squabbling like children, and they all can't stand each other, and it's just hilarious.
everybody hates everybody in this scene.
Mhm.
Like, I think the only two people who don't hate each other are Lymond and Tom. Like, everybody else hates everybody else.
Like Margaret and Matthew Lennox, they don't hate each other, but they are not in a good place with their marriage right now. And it's just, and down to the immaturity of like Matthew Lennox is stretching out his legs, and it makes the other ones uncomfortable because like their legs are smushed.
Right.
It's just really unpleasant.
Everyone's.
I love how the first thing that Tom Erskine overhears is Lymond calling Lord Lennox a cuckold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is if you think back way early on when Richard like almost drowned with Agnes Harries, and then they went to the Douglas castle, and then they left, and we're left with the Douglases. They're talking about how they better make sure that, basically they say something that basically implies they better make sure he doesn't talk about Margaret. Basically they better make sure that Lymond doesn't put their heir, which is Darnley, his birth, in doubt, because that's their like plan to get the English and Scottish throne is Darnley, and Lymond threatens that because he could be the dad.
So he does talk about it.
And also, sorry, one more thing. 427 is just the way that Lymond comes in, and they're all the first thing that Gray says is, "We are not, I suppose, going to terminate this remarkable history by squabbling over the manner of his death. No, we are pressed for time. This is war, and this man is of the rubbish thrust to the surface by war. Let the guards take him to the marketplace and hang him for a treacherous Scot." So Gray basically says, we're not going to squabble about it, we're just going to kill him. And then what do? They spend the whole scene squabbling about it.
They squabble about it. Yeah. And Lymond even calls them out on their squabbling about it. He's like, remember your English unity. Like, stop squabbling, people.
This lost you the war.
Yeah. It's like, and he's sort of like this great and godly nation. He's got this critique of England in the midst of like unity, solidarity, and brotherhood. Brotherhood, my God. It's just, yeah.
Okay, also one of my all-time favorite lines, when Harry Wharton comes in and he's like, "Lymond, you've got him." And it says, repressively, Lymond himself answered, "I just like being discussed as if I were a disease. Nobody got me."
Yeah.
Oh, and then when he insults Harry Wharton, he reveals what he did, which just was like a throwaway line like 4 chapters ago. He shaved him he shaved off his beard with his own knife. And all the angry faces around the table, with the furious exception of Harry's, broke into ill-repressed smiles. So even though they all hate each other and they all hate Lymond says something so funny that they can't not laugh about it. And it's ripping on one of their own people.
Yeah, like the thing that he hates me for is that I shaved off his beard, which is humiliating. Like, yeah, like he did. I mean, but it's funny. All the other guys are just sitting around laughing. And
wasn't he also the one that he put like the heated helmet on or something? Yeah.
Yep. So clearly not a crippling injury.
No.
But Tom is noticing that Aitchison is starting to revive, so he's starting to move. And he realizes that Lymond sees that as well. So Lymond's doing some things, like Lymond's trying to manipulate the crowd into not noticing that Atchison is starting to revive, and Tom sees him doing this.
Well, in this whole scene where Lymond is really funny, it's all a distraction. He's just play acting. Because we know he's exhausted and devastated, and he's making all these funny jokes, but it's all just one very clear goal. He's
just trying to manipulate this group into giving him a chance to kill Atchison. Like, that's his entire goal. And he also knows that Tom is there. And so there's a point where Erskine sees Lymond look at him, and there's this whole thing about the blue eyes in his, the quick blue glance had identified him.
He's trying to distract the English from seeing that Tom is there as well.
Yeah.
Stay down, you fool, when he finally goes up to the balcony with him.
And also, I love that his strategy is to piss off Margaret so much that she comes and tries to slap him, because that's what lets him take her hostage. But everything he says is I think is true, and he reveals a lot actually in what he says. First of all, he says, don't you know she was using the war as a fulcrum with her for her fishing line, with myself as the prey. If you go back to that scene in front of them, or in front of the fire with the two of them, he's the prey that she's coming after. And then he talks about how Christian dies, and he gives this incredible and heartbreaking view on it. If your eyes burn from their sockets now, you would be lost and terrified and appalled as she was, and you are men. You're not an enemy country in the hands of a cruel and bitter woman, or galloping blind on a frightened horse over unknown fields with a dead body behind you and a pack of hounds who killed him baying at your heels. He sees exactly what she did, and he sees exactly what Christian must have been through, and he's so angry, and he both is trying to save the country, but he also is wanting to hurt Margaret and reveal what a monster she is.
Clearly what she did with Christian was so abominable that her own people would condemn her for it, because she is like, you liar, stop talking, and he's only telling the truth. And so in which case she comes and tries to hit him, and he is able to grab her and make his way to the stairway where Tom is. And then they have this whole thing where he's basically just trying to get a good shot at Atchison, and there is the guy with, what do they call the weapon?
A sack.
Arquebus.
Arquebus.
The loading of an arquebus is a protracted affair. So they knew they had a little bit of time before this guy can fire this weapon. So
it's like a very, very early prototype of the pistol.
Yeah. Okay. And so there's Atchison is about to tell them it's about the Queen. Like, I've got something to tell you. It's about the Queen. And then Lymond shoots him in the heart, and he dies. And Lymond is then shot. So aiming for Lymond's body, given the brilliant, unmoving target of his white shirt, the marksman made no mistake, because Lymond is not trying to avoid the pistol. He's only trying to get the shot of his single arrow. So he makes no attempt to evade this potentially fatal wound. And then he sort of falls into Tom's grasp, and the chapter is over. Lymond, however, is not dead, because we are reading the Lymond Chronicles, and it goes on for at least 4 more books. So there's no way.
Unless the lead character in the next 5 books is Richard of Lymond, which isn't a thing.
No, it's not going to happen. But it is a very dramatic end to this chapter, and we finish it with, oh my God, what's going to happen? How is he going to get out of this? And I'm very excited to see what Tom does. Like, I'm super intrigued, because Lymond has obviously passed out from this wound. So what is Tom going to do? How is he going to get them out of this?
Well, he'll either get him out somehow, or they'll both be taken prisoner, which I don't see happening.
I think he's going to get him out, and I'm intrigued to see how that's going to happen.
I think so too. I think he's seen enough to know that Lymond is on the up and up. So, I mean, he just saved Scotland, for God's sakes.
Yeah, right. And I am unsatisfied, actually, with the confrontation between Richard and Lymond so far. Like, it was great. It was a wonderful scene. I'm really glad we had it. But I feel like that whole thing is still massively unresolved. So I still want to see more of that.
There's 2 pretty long chapters, so there will definitely be another, I think, moment. Perhaps not a sword fight. I think Richard's got that out of the system. And I think Tom's sort of witness of what just happened will sort of help Richard to at least not kill Lymond right away, to maybe give him a chance to speak.
Well, I mean, there's ample evidence and many, many witnesses to the fact that Lymond had the legal, he could have killed his brother legally because he won this duel, and the law is on his side if he kills Richard, and he didn't. So there's a whole bunch of witnesses to that. Now, Richard may be mad about that as well, but because he lost, but we'll see.
A couple other things from the scene, because I love this scene so much. I think it's incredibly beautiful and poetic. I love the way she builds the tension, and it's like it goes back to the day being beautiful and the way that Lymond showed up so hopefully. There's all these themes of hope crushed, and there's this moment where Tom is thinking, they held the hour in their fingers like a daylily. They had merely to destroy Akeson and go. But then this ominous whatever he is, arquebusier shows up, and then it's so eerie. The glimmer of a slow match swept through the dark transept like a firefly. The black mouth of the hackbutt, steady as a wand, inexorable as Melpomene, turned like a dark flower to its killing, and Erskine cried softly, "Oh God." It's so scary. And then at the very end, when Lymond is shot, and it says, Erskine saw the long hands loosen, the sudden uncontrolled sway, but was not prepared for the drowned, revealing blue gaze meeting his like a blow, and died stinkingly martyred, said Lymond, with painful derision, and losing hold bit by bit, slipped into Erskine's gentle grasp.
Yeah. Which is such a dramatic evidence that Lymond deliberately chose to die and save Scotland.
Yeah.
Like, and Tom is like a visceral witness to that. So,
and it was very foreshadowed, like he was already ready to die to save Christian.
yeah.
And now that she's gone, what does he have to live for? He can't clear his name. There's nothing left. At least here he can die as a hero. I love the way that, I don't know, I think we get a lot more about Margaret. I hate talking about this forever, but I think it's interesting in the context of the wider series, and also in like what she did to him, is the way that he talks about her as, I offered myself for sale in exchange for the truth. Your wife was eager to buy. Like he was selling himself to her. He was giving himself as prey to her. And he says later, he tells Matthew that you are one with her through her with any man, from the highest to the most humble, whom she wants to dominate. Like, she is this terrifying like figure of, like, you talked about the power dynamic between them last time, which was really insightful. And I think I'm surprised you saw that before this scene, because I think it's really apparent in this scene. The power dynamic of her over him is, or whatever it was in the past, was obviously very much in her favor, and he's very hurt by it. And he's, even though this is all a distraction, like, this is what he's zeroing in on about her.
Yeah. By the way, I just got a text, so we're okay on time. Oh, my family chat got moved, so
we can talk more about it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's this. I really love the way this book plays with power. I think, like, we talk about it a lot in literature. You know, who has power and who doesn't, and how do you resist power or gain power, or whatever. But I think that Dunnett does this wonderful thing of taking characters and situations that have a lot of power, and twisting those or flipping those. I mean, even just things like the women at the ostrich, you know, being key things. Like, they should have no power, you know, and yet they are able to influence the events of these countries. And yeah, I really like that too. And Margaret should be in many ways invincible to a lot of people. I mean, not the few men who have more power than her, but there's not that many of them. But Lymond can still do things.
Yeah, and she can't stop herself from running over to snack him, which is how she loses.
Yeah. Even someone who has a lot of power, like, they still have their own weaknesses.
Yeah. Well, and I just love the way at the end he gives them a lecture. And he gives them a lecture about the way they're waging war. You know, corrective pressure and armed coercion are two of the longest, least successful, and most offensive ways of waging a war. Like, he's you know, playing for time, but he's like right about everything.
Yeah. Like, shame on you. This is not going to work.
Yeah. And I just love also just this martyrdom motif that then comes full circle at the end, and we find out that all this stuff about Lymond being excommunicated and Lymond being so selfish and Lymond being only out for himself is all crap, and he's actually like so heroic.
Yeah, he's not.
I think it was easy to see that coming, though.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But how did you see it?
They didn't see it. Like,
no, yeah, but
the other characters in the novel don't see it. We got a lot of hints along the way. Okay, so Philippe, are you still on your Dandy Hunter?
yes, there was nothing really in this chapter to talk about. He wasn't in it at all. The only thing I got was that handy dandy prickly pandy line, which Lymond says a lot of ridiculous things at ridiculous times, but why was he saying that specifically to Richard? After they had the fight and Richard was trying to say, you've tried to kill me several times. So I don't know. It could just be nothing, but something tells me it's not. So there's only 2 more chapters. So if it is a thing and it's going to be revealed, it's got to be revealed soon. So
I'm totally willing to go along with you. I feel like your argument was good last time. So
I mean, this chapter was almost exclusively Lymond dealing with Christian and then dealing with Richard. So we didn't have a lot of room for some of the other minor characters that have been satellites around him through this story.
So you said, Dee, that you feel like there's some more unresolved between Lymond and Richard. What are you wanting, I guess, to happen between them, or what are you hoping for?
Well, I want Richard to acknowledge that he's wrong about his brother. I mean, I want there to be some sort of either internal or external acknowledgement that he's wrong. I would prefer an external acknowledgement that he's wrong. But I don't know. I just want Lymond to be able to go like back into the bosom of his family and you know, like have a relationship with his mother that's open and in the public eye, you know, and not have to sneak around. And so that's what I would like at the end of the story. But again, a couple of things. So I don't think we've hit the darkest moment of the story yet. I think that's still to come, which is odd to say when your hero or your protagonist is apparently shot, perhaps dead. I mean, like, obviously he's not dead, but he did collapse into the arms of the person with him and he was shot. So. Yeah, but I still think the darkest moment is ahead. I don't think we've hit it yet.
Why?
There's too much left in the book. I think we've got
like another 100 pages, I think.
Yeah, like there's way too much left of the book for that to have been the climax. So I think there's going to be at least another spanner in the works with the whole Queen and the French thing. Something else is going to happen. Like nobody's been defeated, right? So they did prevent the courier from saying anything about the Queen, but like the English haven't been defeated in any way. There's nothing stopping them from like gathering another army and marching north to get them in the next week or so. So I want to see Richard and Lymond have some catharsis and healing or whatever. I want to see some sort of political victory or loss that's clear. Yeah, I guess that's what I want.
What about you, Philippe?
Well, I would like to see Lymond exonerated for a lot of things, but most specifically the death of his sister. I feel that since we don't quite know about it, I'm not sure if he knows the truth of what happened either, because we've seen that he feels really guilty about what happened to Eloise. So there's something there. He doesn't quite know what happens because he feels guilty about it. But I would like him to find out the truth once and for all. And I think perhaps that lies with Samuel Harvey and what he confessed to Christian, which unfortunately, at the current standing, we will never know. Unless
there's a priest?
There's a priest who was there and signed off. So maybe Lymond will find this priest. I don't know.
So I do have one question I would like answered. Why were Christian's papers blank? So like if she got Samuel Harvey to confess, which I believe that she did, and that there was a priest, like at least as far as Christian knew, Samuel Harvey was confessing. It was probably a verbal confession that somebody wrote down, or that Samuel Harvey wrote down and then he signed and the priest signed. But for some reason, Christian genuinely believed that what she had in her possession was a confession from Samuel Harvey. So that makes me believe that Samuel Harvey did actually confess at some point. Yeah. So is there a priest floating around that knows the truth? Question one. Question two, if Samuel Harvey did actually write out a written confession and sign it, where is it? If Christian didn't have it, I would like that answer.
Do you think is there any more that you want to see with any other characters?
Like, I definitely want more from Sibylla. I want her to like be some sort of I've known what's been happening this whole time situation.
Yeah.
I just feel like she's one of the most intuitive characters that we've seen and has been showing it in really minuscule ways. Or she's been showing it, but Dorothy Dunnett hasn't really let us know yet.
And can she just give Lymond a hug? That's what I want. I just want him to get a hug from his mom.
They've only been in the same room together once at the very beginning. Lymond set fire to the castle, which I believe Sibylla was in on, but that happened so long ago that I would have to reread it to get more clues on that. So.
Oh, and Will Scott. We need some sort of resolution to Will Scott. I would like him to come to some sort of like crushing understanding of how wrong he was about Lymond. And then to be honest, I would really like them to have I would like Lymond to actually take him under his wing again and be like, okay, now you know, like let's actually come be my apprentice and I'll, mentor you. Like I think that would be kind of cool.
If Will makes it to the end of this book, which I see no reason currently for him not to, I would like to see him in future novels as well.
Yeah. I'd like to see him grow and become a good man.
Because I kind of ship them too.
Yeah.
I know that's never going to happen because Dorothy Dunnett wrote these books in the 60s, but...
I don't know.
Nice to read.
But yeah, I would not be sad if later books turned into the Lymond and Will go on adventures. I would not be sad about that. So
if Will can redeem himself by doing something heroic for Lymond before the end of this book.
Yeah, but exactly. He definitely needs to come to some sort of contrition, like ask for forgiveness. I mean, like there needs to be some sort of dramatic I was wrong and you were right and I apologize for trying to get you killed multiple times, kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So there we go.
I was definitely in the same boat. I was definitely very invested in the relationship between Lymond and Will. Not shipping them necessarily, because Will just seems so much younger and like so clueless that like I don't ship them, because I think Lymond would somehow be taking advantage of Will just because Will is such an idiot. Not that they're not adorable, and I do really enjoy their interaction.
At this point,
I kind of ship them not getting together. I ship Will's crush on Lymond.
Yeah.
I don't know. We have seen that Will has learned something from his time with him. So
Yeah.
maybe it's a 6-book growth cycle that we will see of young Master Will, but probably not.
All right. Any final questions, comments on the chapter?
2 more to go.
4 chapters.
Word, yeah.
All right.
Well, here's a question,
Yeah.
really quick.
We can never just stop. We've always.
And this isn't necessarily about what happens in the books, but when Dorothy Dunnett started writing these, did she have like a 6-book series in mind? Did she know how far she was going to go? Because that really tells to how far she's plotted in advance. If she knew she was doing a number of books, or if she thought she was just going to do one and then was like, oh, this was really good, let's do more.
She had the 6-book series figured out,
Okay.
but she wrote this to be able to stand on its own, because she didn't know if anyone would publish it or she'd end up writing the rest. So it works as a standalone, but it also does set up a lot of stuff that happened off later.
That's good to know.
Unlike George R.R. Martin, she finished it. And unlike George R.R. Martin, she actually like kept her narrative very lean, and she actually like told the story she was intending to tell. It didn't go down some crazy rabbit hole for 4 books or whatever.
I don't know. I'm waiting for her to have a feast scene in one of these books that goes on for 50 pages.
A feast.
Because that's what George likes to do.
Oh.
Oh God, Game of Thrones is all, and the feast scenes with lamprey pie and chicken puff pastry, and they go on for pages and pages.
She's got a feast scene that goes on for pages and pages, and you love every freaking second of it. It is glory.
That's good to know.
It's like Tolkien. They walk through the forest for 40 pages.
There's one book that's a little too much, like, to me it lags a little bit, but in general they're really tight and they really like keep things going. And
that's good.
Tolkien likes to talk about walking through the forests. George R.R. Martin likes to talk about feasts and banquets. And Robert Jordan likes to talk about the colors of everything slashed through the fabrics and the brocade.
Yes. Yes.
And Dorothy Dunnett likes to crush her characters' souls.
Oh no.
But also she likes to make you laugh your ass off right before she does it.
Right. And I really hope that she brings them back from the brink, because if this whole series ends with soul-crushing disaster, I'm going to be mad at you. I'm just going to say.
And I also want to find out that Christian is secretly still alive, but that's not going to happen.
I don't think that's going to happen.
But I would like it.
Her dead body is lying on the bed, I think.
I do love her, and I'm really...
It's a twin sister, and they've been swapping the whole time. No, that's not going to happen either.
I don't think that's going to happen.
That's a little too much soap opera-y for my tastes.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love how Dunnett has so many characters that you love, that even though when you lose one, there's still so many others. At least it's not like, oh man, the one I liked is gone, now there's nothing going.
And I'm sure in 6 books, she will be replaced by someone we like equally, if not more. Possibly Philippa, like you mentioned, Dee.
I'm just saying.
Possibly someone else completely.
It all depends on how much delay we go through. Like,
yeah.
We gotta, like, sometimes gotta pass. Otherwise, it's just creepy. So, but she certainly has demonstrated as a 10-year-old that she can hold her own with Lymond, because he did not get the best of her. And no. She's 10!
Especially the way he gave her that blue brooch and she like threw it on the ground and stomped on it.
She's totally not having any of his shenanigans. And I'm like, as a 10-year-old, that's impressive. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
She's stubborn.
I want to see her at like 24, you know? But, okay.
I'm not going to say a word.
All right.
Anything else before we wrap up?
I think I'm good.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Till next time.